Thank you so much for being here, Herb.
Yeah,
Herb
thank you. Thanks for having
is my colleague. He's the prime. He represents the prime EPRI on this really amazing off-grid low-income apartment complex we're going to present. And you have the slides first, so I'm just going to name it. It's the next epic challenge: reimagining affordable mixed-use development in a carbon-constrained future. And it'll pull together some of the things you guys have seen today, and also present some new stuff that you haven't seen. So,
that.
Herb, take it away. I'll forward the slides for you. Oh, we have to also show the disclaimer, which is that this is sponsored by the CEC, but they haven't approved it, and this is research funded work. Okay, so now you got the disclaimer. Now it's your turn, Herb.
The all important disclaimer. Yeah, thanks. Kind of a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, my name is Herb Yaptinchay. I'm a senior technical and project leader at EPRI, and EPRI is a not-for-profit research organization, and we do research in all aspects of energy, anywhere from doing research work from in large power plants to down to what I call light bulbs, so that the end use side of the energy equation. And what where I primarily work in is in the advanced buildings and energy storage programs, so two separate programs, as well as a cross-cutting program here at EPRI. And this project kind of brings in all of that. So one of the greatest things that I like working at EPRI is being able to work on these demonstration projects that bring in all of these holistic technologies and bringing it to you be able to get it to people who are of greatest need. So working, as Sean pointed out, this is a project that was funded by the CEC. Actually, two aspects of the project. We were awarded a design phase project. I want to say back in 2023. It's been a while, where we were really charged to take a look at how we can bring the next community to the state of California. What is the next community looking like? As you all know, the state of California has very aggressive building goals in terms of trying to get housing out and trying to build it out quickly. But there are a number of challenges around trying to get there. So one of the things we looked at in our design phase was how can we do that using kind of a different idea, using what's already there within the interconnection possibilities from the utilities. So the idea that we put forth in our design phase was to try to put in a non-exporting solution, basically be grid independent 95% of the time. And with the help of Sean and others in our team, as well as Danco Properties, who is the property developer, builder, and owner of this particular community, we were able to work with them in designing this community, this idea of having a affordable, and in this case, 131 low-income units, of which 30 are supportive services, located in Petaluma, which is a very, I would say, pretty innovative community that's really looking at trying to build new, innovative, affordable housing within their community. Also located in a transit hub. So trying to find this like great site where we're able to do all this work. And there are really five aspects to this particular project. And I always want to divide it into five because each of those things could individually be projects of their own. As I mentioned, the biggest thing that we're trying to do in this project is to demonstrate this 95% grid independent. So during the course of the year, we have a system that is not exporting. Basically, we have a large system, a 5.2 megawatt hour battery, coupled with a 1.5 gigawatt solar, where we're basically putting together something that's self-sufficient, that we're not having to use the grid often. The second piece of this is the EV charging stations, which we're looking at two things here: bidirectional resilience, trying to see how bidirectionality will work in augmenting our current system, as well as looking at managed charging, seeing how we can manage the current level 2 chargers as well as the bidirectional resilience into a community as large as ours. The third is looking at high efficiency appliances and the design of a building. Again, the idea is to not only have this 95% grid independent community, but also trying to see if we can create something that's efficient using and bringing to low-income communities uh, the most latest appliances. And Sean will kind of go into these two pieces shortly. And then the last two pieces are, one building will have gray water recycling, and throughout the community, we'll be looking at edible landscaping, again, appropriate landscaping to the community and the city. And the last is community engagement. I think, I did an event out in Petaluma a few months ago, and one of the things is being able to educate the community on what's kind of going on, not only with the community itself, but how we can use energy more efficiently and what options there are out there as far as energy is concerned. Again, in this presentation, we'll focus on the top three. I'll focus on the battery, and Sean we'll do the second and third bullet. So thanks, Sean. If you could, yeah. So this is how our community is kind of set up. Now, if you take a look at the upper part, this is pretty much how a normal community is set up. So you get an interconnection from a PG&E, and if you look at to the left at the upper part there, if you happen to have some EV chargers, you would have 1 meter, and that 1 meter will be connected to how many EV chargers you have. And then to the right, each of the units, including the buildings themselves, would have your standard PG&E meters. What makes this whole project unique is if you come down from the PG&E meters on the right-hand side and you go down to the middle, we have these automatic transfer switches. These are actual hard-coded switches that allow the regulation between the battery, which we have in the middle, as well as the bidirectional EV chargers, which are connected to the battery, and the solar, which is connected to the battery. So that's one big system to be regulated. So again, the automatic transfer switches take the power that's coming from PG&E, take the power that's coming from the battery, and we regulate it back and forth. Like I said, the goal is 95% bi-direction, 95% non-exporting. So we will be grid independent during 95% of the year. But there will be times of the year where we'll be actually at 100%. As you can imagine, during the summer, when we have quite a bit of sunlight, shoulder seasons, just because of where Petaluma is, we don't really get an enormous amount of rain and cloud cover most of the year. That we will be, hopefully during most of the year, be about 100% of the time. It'll just be during the winter where we're going to have to do a lot of regulation. Again, when the sun goes down around 5:30, and so we just have less sunlight and more time to go through it. So essentially, the power is then regulated through these automatic transfer switches, which then goes into the apartment tenants from there. Okay? And if you have any questions, we'll take them towards the end. So again, this is kind of an idea that is actually moving forward. This is not something that's just on paper. So as I said, we were granted a build phase grant by the CEC, which I failed to mention earlier, which actually is making this thing happen. So as you can see here, these are some latest pictures from last week with the construction actually happening. The goal is by next year. So this time next year, July 2027, we'll have a community that will be up and running. So if you actually drive up there to this particular community, you will see the first 4 buildings along the main street, which I believe is McDowell Street in Petaluma, is already constructed. Well, not completely constructed. We're kind of putting in insulation at the moment and putting in drywall, and the back buildings are we're putting in the zero carbon concrete. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah, we've got footings with zero carbon concrete and got slabs of 50%. The zero carbon concrete is very sticky, so it was they had a little bit of a crisis, like getting it out of the trucks fast enough and getting it smooth fast enough ended up being a problem. So you had to
Yeah.
do a lower, higher GHG content slab so they could smooth it. So I'm going to take over on this part of it to speak about some of our analyses. Herb, please chip in as I go along. So this question, the Energy Commission asked us to try to do just I think 4 to 12 o'clock off grid is what they'd asked for initially, and we in response to Danco tried to take it to 95%. They wanted a solution which we provided, a faster hookup solution, as Herb was saying. They did get their hookups much faster, even though this is a crazy system, huge solar array, etc. It went faster because we're not exporting it to PG&E. So I want to ask this question, like how and can we and how would we get rid of all these red dots, which are the gas power plants in the Bay Area. And where Petaluma is this little star with a blue star. That's where Panama was calling in from this morning for his talk. Now, the first part is power. I think Jamie, he made a very good point about people's concerns around the grid and adding demands to the grid. You hear that all the time. So on the left-hand side, this is a standard Danco all-electric apartment. That means that the HVAC system would have a little bit of electric resistance backup. The heat pump water heater would have an electric resistance backup element. And we had, Herb was pointing out those 100 amp automatic transfer switches. We were trying to make sure that all of them were 100 amps as opposed to having to buying different models and having different sizes because physically they change size. So we set 100 amps as a threshold for all the apartments. And we went to Danco and said, okay, this is for everyone's benefit. We're going to direct you towards appliances that reduce the instantaneous power. It's not necessarily their energy use over the year, although that also happens, but instantaneous power. So this is a graph that shows the addition of, or the subtraction, I should say, of power demand. So the first one here is a 120 volt heat pump water heater. Greg Fotenhauer just presented was a brilliant leader in helping us think through that strategy with all the data he collected. So that's what they're getting, 120 volt, no electric resistance backup. So that's, instead of being 4,500 watts, it's 500 watts. It's one ninth as much. Then the AFOCA, which is actually a larger impact just because of the way that HVAC gets treated in analysis, they treat it like it's always on, whereas water heaters would be on 40% of the time, the way you would analyze it. So you get a different amount of benefit. So while ostensibly doing the same thing of reducing the same amount of electric resistance element from both, they both had like a 30 amp backup. Um, you get a larger benefit by going after the HVAC system. So this is combined now, both the water heater and the HVAC system. We got out the electric resistance. And Danco always puts in, or not always, usually puts in an outlet for people to plug in their electric resistance dryers. They do all electric apartments. And we said, okay, that dryer outlet that you're actually going to cap, you're not even going to open that up for use for the next 15 years. If you do that, then we've got a problem. So why don't you just cap a different kind of circuit, one that relies upon a combined washer dryer that uses a heat pump? You still have the circuit you want, and people still get their laundry service someday if they want it. But that once again dropped our power demand, and that was the one that got us over the finish line. Now, I've been encouraging them to consider the Watt Zipper stoves that Sazi mentioned, but they don't have to. And so they're like, well, we don't want to. They didn't want to do yet another experiment. And I'm granted, this whole project is called Next Epic Challenge, and we've had a lot of work to get them to do so many changes to their design strategies all at once. Now, Greg produced this graph, and I love it. I was just showing you here how we're trying to get everyone below 100 amps according to the code. The code grossly overestimates how much power people actually use. Here you can see, well, we might be designing for 100 amp panels. With these all electric apartments, um, we can see that they're actually peaking on average between 2 and 4 amps, not 100, not 30. And the highest average peak that we found was a 12 amp average peak. You can see this one here just to the left. That's what 3,000 watts is roughly. That's the wattage on the side. You take the wattage, you divide it by 240 volts, that gets you the amps. So in the real world, people are going to be going, say, between 2 and 12 amps. And we're putting in 100 amp automatic transfer switches and like redesigning the apartments to make sure that they, by code, fit in. If the code is reflective of reality, it would be an order of magnitude less, like 90% less capacity in the panel, because this is how people are. So we're pretty confident this is going to work out. Now, this is a beautiful graphic that Kobe Phillips on our team developed. I want to give shout outs to PAE and really all of the folks, Dylan Anderson on our team who did excellent solar work. Now, I'm going to walk you through 6 different ways that we looked at this design. Sorry, I have my mom is coming to the door at this exact moment. I'm presenting right now. Okay, but I got peach pie out of the deal. Okay, so starting from the bottom in light green, this scenario is a 2 megawatt hour battery, 1.26 megawatt hours of solar, and no continuous installation. Okay, Now that what we're going from on the left-hand side, that's it says 88% to 100%, that's the hours off grid annually. And then from left to right, this is the number of electric vehicles that would be bidirectionally adding electricity into our battery. How many cars do we need? There's this question because we've always thought we needed cars. Now, unfortunately, the Energy Commission doesn't fund cars. So we have zero budget for cars. So zero is here on the left-hand side. And it looks like Sonoma Clean Power is going to offer us $30,000 for up to 2 cars. So we'll see. So in light green, note here that with that size battery and solar array, that in order to get to 95% off grid, what we got grant funded for, it took us 16 cars of there plugged in and being used in a normal way. These are already available through a car share program, which is why the lines are kind of bumpy, is because there's some rounding errors. Because basically we're assuming that the cars are being checked out, say 70% at 5 p.m., but 40% at 8 a.m., that kind of thing. We have a whole we had 65 cars that were able to study their usage patterns to more or less try to figure out how to do bidirectional charging while still letting people use cars. Okay, so that's built in. So then you go up where you add continuous installation. That's the next one in light blue. So same solar array, same battery, but with continuous installation, kind of using the building as a battery, it raises air conditioning loads and it lowers heating loads. We have tons of electricity in the summer, doesn't matter then. But we didn't have as much electricity in the winter, so we're making a thermal battery by adding continuous installation. But really the problem is not having enough energy. So adding in light purple a larger solar array, adding about 20% more solar. That gets us to light purple. Now we start over. In dark green is a 5.2 megawatt hour battery with that same smaller solar array. And then we add not just the 5.2, what if we add continuous installation to that? That's the darker blue line. And we're starting to see that in darker blue, we only needed, say, 7 cars to get over 95%, whereas in green, we needed 9 cars. The last solution is that the 5.2 megawatt hour battery and 1.5 megawatt hours of solar, so a larger amount, that gets us without any cars above 95%. But note that we have no continuous installation. It was using the building as a battery. If you look at the prices for this on the lower sides, you see I have, go to the lower right-hand corner. It says no additional cost for the battery. Turns out that in the roughly 5 years that we've been developing this, the cost of battery dropped so dramatically that the contract cost we set years ago allowed us to get 2.5 times more battery now under construction than it was way back in planning. That's just dramatically because batteries have dropped in price mostly. It was a little bit overbid because we weren't sure quite what we're doing, but it was mostly battery drop in price. So we added more battery, no extra cost. If we were to add the continuous installation, it's $1.8 million. Or if we add a little bit more solar, it's $370,000. So with those different options, the optimized system, what's actually getting built is a 5.2 megawatt hour battery with the biggest solar array we could pretty much fit on the site and without continuous installation because that $1.8 million is really hefty. Um, Shane earlier was presenting on Passive House and Emma had worked out with that. Now, we are not in the East Coast. We don't see snow in Petaluma ever. Like DC gets snow. Shane's family, they actually run snow plows. That's one of the things that's, Duffy Industries does. So passive house airtightness makes sense in a much colder climate, but we found it made almost no sense. So to summarize here, these lines here are from the top, that's domestic hot water. There's real no change from air, but in in blue, there's a little bit of change in refrigeration energy. In orange and heating, there's a significant as from left to right, the air exchanges go up from say passive house on the left-hand side, zero point 0.6 air exchanges to just Title 24, you pass the code is 5 air exchanges. So 10 times as much air leakage. But investing all the money and effort into that, that got us only 0.15% more off-grid hours. That wasn't enough. In the slide I just showed you, you saw that we're working in whole numbers, 95%, 96%. 0.15 does not move a dial. And it did increase overall energy consumption by about 1%, but we have enough energy. We're just focusing on the winter time of not running off-grid or on-grid. Now I want to show you the role of cars. If we were to get to, I showed you here that we don't need cars with the size of the battery that we have now and the size of the solar array that we have now. We're at 96% starting off. That's amazing. Wasn't what we expected in the beginning. We thought we were going to do passive house. We discovered it didn't make enough of a difference. Now, if we were to go 100%, because we already got to about 95 plus percent with just the battery and the solar, but if we wanted to go to 100%, I want to show you this graphic. In orange, this is day after day. This is all 365 days, and this is an analysis of hourly, so 8,760 hours is what you're seeing here. In orange, this is curtailed solar, just wasted, could be used. Essentially, we could charge every single car, 142 cars, off all this curtailed solar. We don't have it wired up to do that, but that's how much extra energy we have. And we're doing that so we can make energy in the wintertime. On the left-hand side, this is January, and all the way to the right-hand side, that's December. So this is in the middle is the summertime. The left and the right is the winter. Okay, orange is curtailed solar. Green, that's the battery's state of charge. Now, in light green, there's a little bit of a mislabeling at the bottom. I apologize, but in dark green is the mid green that is without EVs, and light green is with EVs. So just look at the wintertime on the left-hand side. With electric vehicles contributing, our battery state of charge is in light green. It's high enough. It's keeping us off grid. If those cars weren't there, the darker green below it, that would be taking us onto the grid. Once you get below, say, that 1,000 line, you're having to use the grid because it's no longer safe to put that energy demand on the battery. So light green from cars is dumping energy into our grid. You might say, where does that energy come from though, Sean? And truly, it comes from the grid. Those cars would be driving someplace else and getting electricity potentially. You could think of it though as a resiliency measure. What if we wanted to keep this apartment complex going and we could send cars out to bring back energy? But if it's just purely like, why go off grid? Maybe you were doing that because the local utility wouldn't provide you service. You're isolated. And in fact, in Petaluma, one of the triggers for this is that a different affordable housing developer, PG, said they would not hook up their affordable housing apartment complex because the neighborhood nearby was going to have first dibs on that power capacity to build accessory dwelling units like secondary houses sometime in the future. It was a pretty unpleasant argument that these wealthy people's houses in the future meant we couldn't build affordable housing today, and eventually that project got power. But this is an example of how we could actually develop an apartment complex off grid in a city if 28 out of 142 car spaces had a car that was willing to participate bidirectionally, or 20% of the parking lot. So this is essentially 20% of the tenants. It's 131 apartments, there's 142 spaces. So if 1 out of 5 tenants was playing this game, then we could be off grid from the get-go. Technically, the state law still requires us to have PG&E connections. We cannot not have PG&E meters. So this is just a technical demonstration that grants are showing. I want to give a shout out to MioCard, the car share program that we're working with. They have 65 cars, and so we got to study their usage patterns, and they'll be managing the first 2+ cars that we get. I want to spend some time on this. This is deep learning. Check time here. Okay. There's 2 challenges to doing the least cost way of bidirectional charging. And when I say least cost, if you have a DC bidirectional charger, electricity comes out of the car as DC battery electricity. That costs $10,000 to purchase and probably 20 to 30 grand to install at least. That's the lowest cost. If you get an AC bidirectional charger doing the same work, but AC means that the inverter is in the car, you don't have to buy a second one sitting there. So the AC inverter, which already exists in cars now, and they're like huge inverters, 100 kilowatt inverters, 150 kW inverters. If they just release 4 kW or 6 kW from their car inverter, that means you don't have to buy a new one. However, there are challenges. And just from the left-hand side, this is the simple part. The car battery has electricity on board, and with its onboard inverter, which follows these standards, you make AC electricity. It goes into the charger, which is following these standards. And I just want to mention this took us a ton of research to figure all these standards. Screen capture this if you're all curious. Okay, and then the electricity, having gone through these safety standards, goes into electric panel. That's the power part of it. And from the panel, then it can go into the grid or it can go into our battery. But the data and security flow is where this gets challenging. So we have all the UL standards and ISO standards that we need at this point to do this work. It's all done. But the problem we have is that the public key infrastructure that I italicized here, it starts at your car. And in order for you to have secure data and information security, you have to have this for-profit or nonprofit provide data keys. This is like for encryption of your data because you're participating now in a public information. Your information is going out to the grid and your grid's communicating with your car and you're doing monetary back and forth. There's money being exchanged as well as like state of charge. And so this secure handshake between the electric vehicle communication controller and the supply equipment communication controller, the charger that sits there, you need to have that public key happening twice. And right now in America, because of the current administration, from a lack of regulatory direction from the state of California, I want to point some fingers here, we don't have anyone saying which of these public key infrastructure tools to use. And that is it. At this point, that is why we keep on having to try to make specific deals with a car manufacturer to do bidirectional charging with our battery because we don't have to use a public key infrastructure. And they're willing to do that, maybe. But for everyone else who has a car that you want to charge into the grid, our challenge right now is simply a matter of coordination and it's not at all technical. It's kind of a deep frustration. So I want to point out that the public key infrastructure, either using Hubject or Ardato, which are two of 5 or 6 different companies offering this, but these ones are leaders and they're interoperable, etc. That's where we're at right now. If you have any, control over the world. And why is because check this out. On the left-hand side, this is the residential batteries in California. This guy's so proud, and it's such a dinky amount of battery. In light green is 2025. This is the cars driving around in California. We're looking at roughly 10 times more batteries in people's cars than on people's houses, and more than twice as much battery as we've installed into the grid. And this will continue to be the way. Like the whole planet wide, people are buying cars way more than utilities are putting in grid batteries. And it will always be that way if you just look at the amount of cars that need to be replaced out there versus the grid service batteries that you could even try to install. We have an overwhelming amount of battery available to us for lack of this public key infrastructure communications. That's pretty much what's holding us up at this point. Yes, existing EVs would need to have retrofits with some of their hardware and software. So I'm not trying to say all of these cars are available to do that work, but certainly all the cars to be sold. California currently is only 3% EVs on the road. We're going to get that other 97% in the next 15 to 20 years, just with natural cars leaving the market. Every car disappears over a course of 20 years, statistically. I don't mean every car, but statistically, every car. So it's going to happen. And that is my presentation. That is Herb's presentation. We're here for you if you have any questions. Oh, on the right-hand side, I was just showing like everyone wants to do it. Just give them a tiny bit of money and they would happily sell their electricity. You're welcome, everybody. And I think we're on time too. We got 1 minute, and so since I'm not going to ask myself any questions, Herb, any thoughts you had as you were doing this? Any last words to share before we go to the next presenter?
I think the last things I think is a really cool project. Kind of shows where working with the CEC, we're able to do these kind of cool projects. As Sean pointed out, we've got like we're looking at this in 5 different aspects of it. So we hopefully by next year we'll have some more data for you all to kind of chew on and actually have things on the ground where you all can see what we're accomplished in this particular community.